Right.
So that risk is there. And the future, if and when we have a general purpose AI, then of course there are these big questions of, can a machine take over? What will be its intent? Can it be conscious? Those are much bigger questions, and I
Big,
think could be existential questions that we should start thinking about.
right. So, so two things came out. I mean, one is definitely around the idea of ethics and where it touches AI, and also in terms of this policy direction that we were touching upon briefly. So, I'll just kind of turn to Maitreesh. Uh, Maitreesh, if we broad base our discussion on the role of AI, let's say, and আমি এখানে একটা developmental perspective নিয়ে আসছি, that এই আমরা যদি not just healthcare, though the paper which Kunal and Ananda has written is completely focused on healthcare and AI, but if we kind of broad base the discussion and say that okay, যেরকম education, healthcare, এরকম নানান সেক্টরে আমাদের AI কি করবে, বা is there some kind of a stand, or is there some kind of a comprehensive policy direction that okay, this is the way we are going to move in the next 10 years or something like that from a government perspective?
There are some documents, Niti Aayog and others have done it, but I always feel, and maybe this is putting it a bit provocatively, but for a lot of these government committees and programs, it reminds me of Upendra Kishore Rai Chaudhury's story about Mojuntali Sarkar, who was in charge of counting the waves in the sea. Technological change happens, and bureaucrats sitting in whichever comfortable seats they're sitting, they come up with regulations trying to do this and that. Even when it's well intentioned, right, I'm not sure whether it's effective. Sometimes it can be counterproductive. So I haven't read anything that in some ways has a kind of light touch and kind of forward looking view, where how it can be harmonized with the rest of the economy. So it is as benign or wise as any other government intervention we have seen over the last several years, and including the pandemic. So I would not hold my breath.
Okay. So I mean, so I just kind of talking about the ethical uses of AI. I mean, I do understand what your point about the logic, the policy perspective. Definitely, government has kind of waded into areas which they don't understand at all. There has always been a very strong rhetoric in our country, Maitreesh, given the fact that আমাদের যখন ব্রাঞ্চ অটোমেশন হয়েছিল পাবলিক সেক্টর ব্যাংকে, সেখানেও কিন্তু প্রচন্ড ট্রেড ইউনিয়ন মুভমেন্ট হয়েছিল। And I mean, there has been a very steady I don't want to say antagonistic, but there has been a very steady concern that AI is going to take up our jobs and blah 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 and all of that stuff. So do you see anything remotely like that the rollout of AI should be in more non-controversial areas, or areas, given the fact that ours is a very labor-intensive kind of an economy, right? So should AI target areas which are mostly capital-intensive, or how do we reimagine work and employment in this kind of a conundrum?
Sure, I would say if as AI is described as the fourth industrial revolution after the water and steam engine, and then the electricity and its applications, and then of course the electronic and internet, etc. This is so I would say, see, if you look at the economic impact of any technological change, and from that, for that matter, you can even go back to invention of the wheel or fire, there's an immediate displacement effect of certain mechanical tasks. That's whatever sector where it would replace it, right? As they say, the invention of the rail engine displaced horses. Horses were rendered unemployed, right, from the horse carriages. Right. So similarly, anything that can be done using machines, and whether AI, I think Kunal gave very nice overall introduction as to where it's special. But there's also any other technological innovation, right? I mean, anything that a machine can do faster, stronger, in greater volume or scale. So there's going to be an immediate displacement effect of certain sectors and certain occupations, right? But then there's complementarity because machines can't run on their own, right? So therefore, while there's substitutability, certain tasks and certain things will be rendered, clearly those people, like we have all seen, maybe you are younger, but Kunalda, Ananda, I have seen in Hajra mode, there were these guys sitting with typewriters. So you took your documents to them and they would write some, some application or something. So clearly they were rendered jobless after the invention or spread of computers and printers and etc. So there's that. But as I said, that there were lots of complementary things, like, a lot of the, say, just think about Amazon type activity, that sector, right? So earlier, যেটা দোকানে যে sales force ছিল, যেভাবে করা হতো, that got displaced, right? But now you have a lot of involvement of AI as well as various kinds of automated processes. But then you also have the delivery whole industry and the packing and so on. So therefore, in net terms, it's not. It is, as of now, it's not clear whether the jobs have been, overall employment prospects have been reduced or not. But I will come to some aspects of developing countries where there are reasons for concern. But I'm just listing through things. Third, দেখো আমরা যে এই প্রতিদিনের জীবনে, whether আমরা গুগলে ট্রান্সলেটর ইউজ করি, as Kunal gave that example, or Alexa বা Siri বা যাই করি, হ্যাঁ, or Netflix কে বলি এরকম সিনেমা দেখবো বা কিছু, হ্যাঁ, কমান্ডে. So there's a productivity improvement, and that has a direct improvement in general economic sort of the frontier. You can do more things, you can do things better. And also it has improved the quality of our lives in certain ways. Even if you're in a relatively remote area, having access to a smartphone and all of that does enable you to do things differently from what you could do before. So I would say that's the third general effect of this kind of thing, that there is a general improvement on productivity and quality of life, which in principle could be spread around and overall be beneficial. But the fourth thing, and this is where I want to sort of, I think some of the reasons for alarm have justification. It'll also create new inequalities. It will accentuate earlier inequalities, and it will also create new inequalities, right? So we already know that, for example, the person who got displaced from some of those mechanical tasks, যদি না একটা social safety net থাকে, একটা welfare state থাকে, that person is out in the cold. এবং সেটা তো হয় না যে, again, we are all aware of both the empirical sort of statistical data as well as anecdotal things. So সেই জন্যে এটার সাথে সাথে, whether you call it the digital divide বা সেটা থেকে বা even in general, এই একটা accentuated inequality এগুলো হবে. So আমি এইভাবেই ক্লাসিফাই করবো যে there will be direct substitutability, there's potential complementarity, there's a certain expansion of our productive as well as quality of life frontier. That's a potential one. That doesn't mean everybody is getting it. But then there's also this polarized kind of distribution of gains and inequality. That's how I would basically think in terms of how it's going to affect the economy. And as you rightly pointed out, that in developing countries, being labor surplus, some of the mechanical tasks, right? That's where the কোপটা এসে পড়বে. সেখানে the welfare overall considerations could be quite, there could be grounds for serious concern.
Yeah, if I may add one more thing. So far, I mean, starting from Industrial Revolution till recently, all technological innovation, as Maitreesh said, displaced somebody, but those people were usually at the lower end of the economic spectrum. AI has the potential of affecting the very well-paid class. So, and not in every task, but in some tasks. I mean, there are already AI applications here that can replace extremely expensive lawyers from doing certain valuation calculations, because AI does it just as well. So we will probably see a different group of people reacting to AI than we have traditionally seen before. People typically in white-collar jobs may also be affected.
So, in fact, I want to slip in something, if I may, Orko, following up on all that thing. So, I have this sort of pet, theory that when we were growing up in Kolkata, a lot of our notion of what scholarship was, যে উনি অনেক জানেন, হ্যাঁ, মানে you go to this person and he has read lots of books and he knows lots of things, right? কিন্তু প্রফেসর গুগলের ইনভেনশন হওয়ার পরে, whether it's Google Scholar or whatever, and again you can see যে হয় না যে আমি ইয়ে করছি না যে মানে জানাটাকে অ্যাপ্লাই করা বা তুমি কত ক্লেভারলি ব্যাপারটা সার্চ করছো, বাট অন দি আদার হ্যান্ড ইটস অলসো ট্রু সার্টেন কাইন্ড অফ মেকানিক্যাল, তুমি অনেক কিছু মাথায় স্টোর করতে পারো। আগে যেমন হয় না যে যারা তোমার ইয়ে করে কম্পিউট করতো মানে মেন্টালি, বা দে হ্যাড দেয়ার হোয়াট এভার সার্টেন ম্যানুয়াল ডিভাইসেস, সেটা একটা ইভেন বেসিক ক্যালকুলেটর ক্যান ডু মাচ বেটার। So exactly following up on Kunal's thing, clearly it would take away the kind of rents. Rents by I mean anything that you have a premium in a given economy, scarce কোনো রিসোর্স থাকলে তুমি যে প্রিমিয়াম পাও, সেইটা হোয়াইট কলার থেকে শুরু করে অনেকগুলো লেভেলে ইয়ে করছে। এখন তো কিছু কিছু ইয়ে হচ্ছে ওই হোক্স টাইপের বা প্র্যাঙ্ক টাইপের হয়, যে আর্টিফিশিয়াল ইন্টেলিজেন্স তুমি পেপার লিখে জার্নালে পাঠিয়ে দিচ্ছ, মানে ইটস আ প্র্যাঙ্ক থিং, বাট ইউ ক্যান ইভেন জেনারেট আ সায়েন্টিফিক লুকিং পেপার।
No, this is great. So actor, so I mean, Kunal da jeta bollen, the Maitreesh tumi jeta bolle, somewhere down, it's a very Marxian idea. Pardon my saying this, but age technological changes will actually, bring in a change in the superstructure of law and ethics, and the whole the modes of production and the means of production kind of a relationship. ওই যে জিনিসটা যেটা মার্কস একটা বেসিক লেভেলের আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিং, সেই জিনিসটাতে somewhere downward what I find very missing in India is the government does not have a very specific policy saying that okay, this is how I'm going to treat the subaltern people. যেটা কুনালদা বলছেন যে like white collar, blue collar, brown collar, it can affect across the spectrum, but somewhere down when you create that safety net has to be for people who are really slightly disadvantaged people. Is there a case for saying that okay, when it comes to let's say primary education, we will first look at creating some brick and mortar schools at a district level, যেখানে সমস্ত প্ল্যানিং এর টাকাটা actually gets disbursed at that level, right, at a panchayat level. Should we create brick and mortar structure there, put schools, put teachers, and ensure that education starts there in the traditional way, and then maybe at a later stage maybe kind of look at kind of make it a little more stronger with AI or any of these technologies that Kunal was talking about.
So I'll just give one quick thing and I'll let Ananda and Kunalda step in as a name. As an economist, one of the first things we are taught is what happens and what should happen are very different things. Society, given distribution of resources and ownership of wealth and so on, তুমি ভাবো না যে আমাদের দেশে তুমি যদি ভাবো যে আমাদের ন্যাশনাল ইনকামে লিজার ইন্ডাস্ট্রি থেকে শুরু করে যতটা টাকা যাচ্ছে, সেটা কি আমাদের দেশে যে দারিদ্র বা অশিক্ষা বা স্বাস্থ্যের যে সমস্যা, সেখানে গেলে কি বেটার হতো না? 100% অফকোর্স হতো। হয় না কেন? কারণ মানুষ ফান্ডামেন্টালি সেলফ ইন্টারেস্টেড ভাবে ভাবছে, তারা নিজেদেরটা দেখছে, এবং সেখানে সম্পদের একটা যে বন্টনে অসাম্য আছে, সেটার জন্য এটা হচ্ছে, রাইট? সো দ্যাট ইজ আ গিভেন, রাইট? As they say, there's much more money spent in the whole sort of pharmaceutical industry on checking about certain vanity aspects of people, right? ধরো সে তোমার হেয়ার লসই হোক বা ইয়ে হোক, as opposed to ধরো তোমার যেগুলো preventable disease ইত্যাদি, যেটা again Ananda is the health expert, can say more. So I would say that's the basic perspective I take, যে হ্যাঁ, যা হওয়া উচিত সেখানে তুমি যা বললে তার সাথে আমি সম্পূর্ণ একমত। যে আমাদের দেশে আমার একটা স্ট্যাটিস্টিক সবসময় খুব স্ট্রাইকিং লাগে, এই পভার্টি কত পার্সেন্ট লোক পভার্টি তলায় আছে, লাইনের তলায় আছে, পভার্টি লাইনটা কি কনজারভেটিভ না, এগুলো নিয়ে অনেক ডিবেট আছে। বাট বটম লাইন হচ্ছে গিয়ে, আমি অনেক ধরনের সার্ভে বা অনেক রেজাল্ট থেকে বলেছি, আমাদের দেশে 80 to 90%, এটা আমি কনজারভেটিভলি বলছি, মানে অনেক নাম্বার দেখে রেঞ্জটা বলছি, লোক যে স্ট্যান্ডার্ড অফ লিভিং এ থাকে, we wouldn't want anybody we know to be living that standard of living. So therefore আমাদের মোস্ট অফ আর প্রিঅকুপেশনস হচ্ছে ওই মানে ওপরের দিকের ধরো পসিবলি 3, নয়তো 10, নয়তো 15%-এর জন্য। সো আমাদের এন্টায়ার রিসোর্স ডিস্ট্রিবিউশন নিডস টু চেঞ্জ। এটা শুধু এআই বলে না, হ্যাঁ, কিন্তু ওই আর কি, যে মানে স্মরণীয়তারা বরণীয়তারা অনেক কথা বলে গেছেন, আমরাও বলতে পারি, কিন্তু এটা কি করে আমাদের পলিটিক্যাল সিস্টেমে হবে, your guess is as good as mine.
So let me jump in and say that I cannot agree more with Maitreesh. I almost always agree with Maitreesh and Kunal. We get along very well. Kintu arekta aspect of, let me throw in another aspect of the brick and mortar schools, যেটা আমরা সবসময় চিন্তা করি না, সেটা হচ্ছে ইউনিফর্মিটি অফ এডুকেশন লেভেল, রাইট? তোমাকে 10টা স্কুলের টিচার, 100টা টিচার যদি রাখতে হয়, how do you ensure that they all have the same level of training to train the next generation of students, right? We need to have teachers who can train students for the future, not for the past. And so to have that kind of trained teachers is not easy. And we will go into that a little later in healthcare, for instance. It's even more acute, right? যে তুমি ultimately ভালো টিচার পাচ্ছ কিনা। আমি মৈত্রীশ যেটা দিয়ে শুরু করেছিল, যে ভালো টিচার মানে শুধু নট জাস্ট ব্রেডথ অফ নলেজ বাট ডেপথ অফ নলেজ, সেইটাকে তুমি হাউ ডু এনশিওর দ্যাট? আই মিন, সুতরাং the AI might actually get to the point where the playing field is more level, right? I mean, there are economic aspects which Maitreesh is far better equipped to comment on, কিন্তু তার বাইরেও কিছু কিছু জিনিস আছে যেগুলো আমাদের we have to think about, যেটা তোমার, it's just not a very simple problem of generating more schools, because you need to have trained teachers, trained in the sense that for the next generation. That's not always, we don't think about that always as we should.